So let's talk about slip trailing. Basically, slip trailing is taking slip and applying it to a leather hard piece, and what you end up with is a raised line. So it's a good way to add texture, a good way to add pattern and design. So things that you're going to need some slip, some smooth slip. Best thing to do is to dry some clay out and then crunch it up, put it in a cup, and then add some water. Let it sit overnight, let the water soak through there. Take a fork and stir it up, and you'll get really nice smooth slip. We don't want to use any slip that has lumps in it, because it'll get caught in your applicator and it'll make a mess of your project. So be patient and make good slip, or screen your slip. Another thing you're going to need is you're going to need some leather hard clay to work with. And then, of course, you're going to need some sort of applicator bottle. So I've got this one, which is sort of an expensive tool that's made for this. It's got a very small opening to it. It works great with smooth clay like B-Mix. Then I've got another one that was bought at the craft supply store in the silk painting aisle. It's got another small tip to it, a small aperture. That one works pretty well with clay that is smooth or groggy. And then I've got this even cheaper version that I got at the 99-cent store. It has a bigger hole in it, so of course it's going to make a bigger line, but it's a little bit easier to work with because I can have slip that's a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner, and it still seems to work pretty good. So you're also going to need to have a practice slab. And this is important because we need to adjust the viscosity of our slip. So it's got to be the right consistency. The slip can't be too thick, otherwise it's going to be too hard to squeeze your bottle, and your raised line that you achieve will be very prominent. However, it also may not adhere well to your clay. We also can't have our slip too thin, because what happens is, especially if we're working on vertical surfaces, the slip runs all down the piece and you don't have control over it. The other thing that happens is that raised line, because that slip has so much water in it, as that water evaporates, it has a tendency to flatten significantly, so you don't have as much texture to your raised line. Okay, so we need our practice slab so we can adjust our viscosity of our slip. I'm going to check mine right now, and I'm just going to squeeze, make a couple dots, see how it comes out. Okay, that looks pretty good. It looks like it's rounding off a little bit and adhering to the flat surface. So it's not too thick, not too thin. The next thing we want to do is practice the control that we have over our applicator. So I want you to think about just maybe doing a practice run of just doing a couple lines. Notice that the slower you go, the thicker your line is going to be, and it might even look a little bit blobbier. And maybe if you go a little bit faster, you're going to get a thinner line. It might look a little bit more consistent. So play with that. If you're going to be doing dotty things, see how much you have to squeeze to get the size dot that you want. If you're going to be doing curved lines, practice doing that. Oftentimes when we get to the part right there where I'm closest to myself, I kind of lose control and I'm squeezing a little bit more and I'm getting more slip coming out of there. So whatever lines you're going to do on your piece, practice those before you actually start on your work. Now, one thing that you can do is you can draw on your piece with pencil to give you some guidelines. I find that it's pretty helpful, especially if you want to do things that are just straight. That does give me something to go by so I don't end up with crooked lines all over. And then another thing, you know, I'm inspired. It's spring. I'm inspired by what's going on in my garden right now. So I wanted to put some lavender on my pot. So you can draw things out there, but you can also just freehand it too. Now, I want to point out that what I did before I started working, I shook my bottle a bit. I'm trying to get all the slip down by the applicator tip. Okay, so that's one little sprig of lavender. Get a stem on it. Now, while you're working, let's try to make this happen. If you're trying to squeeze and that happens, you get a blob, or maybe there's an air bubble in there and then all of a sudden you get a glob and it's just not what you want. It's not the straight line or the circle. Don't worry about it. It's just clay. All you need to do is take your sponge, wipe it off, maybe even go back over it with your flexible metal rib to smooth that area out, and then go back to doing what you were trying to do. All right? So hopefully this can help you to add some texture and some interest to your work. Give it a try.